and welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show. Today's guest I've known for a number of years. Originally, he was brought in to help me stay at where I was working and to ensure I was able to keep working. I always laugh and say he failed, and he always laughs and stirs me back. And since then, we've become good friends, and he's been one of the people that has helped me on my journey to being independent. So I'd like to introduce you all to Mark Muscat from Digital Access Solutions. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Noel. Hello,
Uh,
everyone.
Mark, can you tell me a bit about yourself? I know that you're not originally a Queenslander.
No, I was born in Melbourne in the early 70s, and I lived in Victoria until about 21 years ago when I moved to Queensland.
God's
Um,
country.
what's that?
God's country.
God's country, yeah. And I did all my schooling and I worked in Melbourne and when I finished my postgraduate degree, I thought I'd move up to Queensland to start afresh, like some people do. And yeah, and it's sort of worked since. I've stayed here in Queensland and haven't really looked back at all.
Mark, I know this is a common question, but I'm going to ask it. Mark, what disability do you have?
Um, um, well, I probably have a number of disabilities, but no, I'm primarily totally blind. I was unfortunate to have a rubella birth. So somewhere down the line during my mother's pregnancy, um, she was in contact with uh, individuals with germ measles, and I was fortunate to have the flow-on effects of being blind um, from that, and the condition that I have is the detached retinas and keratoconus, which is pretty much cornea based. It's where the cornea is not exactly rounded; it's sort of pointed, and that's pretty much it. But functionally, I don't have any vision whatsoever. I do have light perception. And last year, I was diagnosed with another disability, which is um, ASD, and it's an adult spectrum disorder. Um, and yeah, so it's been sort of a learning curve in that whole almost 12 months now.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting, Mark, because when I met you, as I said at the start, you were brought on to help get me independent and keep me independent. What? So you're in the IT industry?
yep. I've got my degrees in computer science, and my undergrad degree was also in mathematics as well. Um, yeah, and I've worked in one way or form in computer science or IT based roles.
Yeah. And so you've done web development, you've done all types of development, database development.
Yes, a lifetime ago, or maybe a
Yeah.
couple. Um, so I've been involved with yeah, web development work mainly. I started off working at Coles Myer, which is a large retailer. Look, they're no longer Coles Myer; they're actually Coles now.
Mm.
But it was a large retailer here in Australia, and I worked there for 4 years. And yeah, my first job was actually in the point of sales support,
Mm.
where we did a lot of the backroom operations work, where made sure that the servers were running and that stores were able to operate and get transactions through and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was exciting because, when a store had a priority one, we dropped pretty much everything, and we all hands on deck and trying to work out what's going on. And that was good because you got to talk to third party, uh, people. If it was a telecommunications problem that was causing a priority one issue, but basically a priority one was when the store couldn't operate.
Yep.
Um, So yeah, it was exciting, but it was also quite taxing, stressful, guys.
Yeah.
And I was I was amazed that I actually got that job, but we'll talk about that later. Um, but I was really happy to work for 3 or 4 years, and then I went and did a postgrad, um, and that was in web technologies,
Mm.
and basically learnt this new thing at the time,
Yeah.
which was the web, uh, which wasn't actually quite new, but it was certainly picking up a lot of rapid with the dot-com era, which was happening around that 99, 2000 year.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, Y2K wasn't the big picture of the problem at the time. Most people were happy that Y2K wasn't going to happen. Um,
Very much so. I remember that era.
well, I made $2,000 on that one night, just being on call. So
Wow.
made me very happy. The only stipulation I wasn't allowed to drink on
Yeah.
New Year's Eve, but which was fine. I didn't really drink a lot anyway, so
Yeah.
it was fine. And I had to be 15 minutes away from the office, which was also achieved. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was an interesting New Year's Eve, 99, 2000.
Yeah.
I was waiting for all the computers to go down. It never happened, but we all knew that was like going to be the case.
Yeah.
But
True. So, Mark, what do you actually do now?
I'm working with you and Alan on digital access, and also do assistive technology, consulting and training, and pretty much keeping in line with the interests that I have, which is technology, improving people's lives with visual impairment, and yeah, pretty much just very keen to sort of try to get the best out of technology for blind people. Um, that being off-the-shelf products or specialized products, which yeah, I believe in sort of working out what's best fit. So that's about it, really.
So, how did you get into that, Mark? That's a big difference from point of sale and web development to assistive technologies.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was I was at uni and I was asked by a friend of mine that I could start training people, with the use of, assistive technologies. And I was doing that for a little bit, but there wasn't I mean, at the time, I was doing that as a voluntary thing because not people, we didn't have the NDIS
Yeah.
insurance scheme at the time or anything like that. I was doing it just to basically, um, yeah, get some experience with actually working with people.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I never really thought of really staying in assistive technology as much. I really wanted to branch off into the regular computer science field.
Mm.
And I really wanted to actually get a job in system administration, which is almost what happened at Coles.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did enjoy that, but it was very stressful. And then I thought, yeah, I wouldn't mind getting back into programming and development. Um, so that that interested me, and so I sort of decided, in a way, to go back and do some further studies in web technology because I thought at the time where that's where the future would be. So I did that, and um, I was able to work for a company based in Melbourne, was actually a company that was based, started by a group of us at uni. So I worked with them for about 5, 6 years, but I
Yeah.
also did some freelance work up here in Queensland, um, um, with development. And then a lawyer got in touch with me and said, um, would you be interested in doing some web accessibility stuff? Because I've got a complaint that's going in the process at the moment. And I said, okay. And basically that led to me doing some, not just testing, but some actual accessibility advice.
Yeah.
And that led to me getting a contract with Domino's Pizza, which is
Hmm.
quite nice to work with. They were lovely people back then.
Yep.
I met somebody at the Brisbane Web. Oh, no, actually, yeah, it was the Brisbane Web Design Group. I think it
Yep.
was, yeah, meetup group that I used to go to quite frequently back then. And then he said, "Oh, come on board." And the CIO at the time, chief information officer, not exec, chief information officer, basically sat me down and said, "This is what we want, blah blah blah." And so I learned a lot out of that because there was a lot of negotiating with marketing and a lot of
Mm.
talking with other information technology people, and it sort of took me took me more into the people management type stuff, which I was a bit scared of.
Yeah.
Not, and I sort of glad that sort of led to the diagnosis that I had last year because I've never
Mm.
really been people oriented, but there's a good reason for that. And so basically, I was learning a lot, and then I at the time was trying to get back into a 9 to 5 job because I pretty much sold the business that I had back to NetAble in Melbourne. Uh, I pretty much turned my clients. I kept probably one or two,
Mm.
and I went to work for Vision Australia for 8 years
Okay. Yep. Which is
as
how I met you. Yeah.
yes, as a assistive technology consultant and trainer. Not trainer as such, but more consulting.
Yeah.
And I did some panel assessing for job access. I did a fair amount of assessments for NDIS. And yeah, that was an interesting, period of time. And I decided to uh, branch off into my own and just do technical sort of stuff, but be good at what I do. Um, well at, and that was the
Yeah.
technology. And you and I were talking about accessibility and how it's been lacking, and that we should talk to people and ultimately help them with their digital access. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
In all your years, obviously you're very different to me because I only lost my sight about 16 years ago, or started losing it. So for me, getting jobs, I didn't have that barrier of, oops, you've got a sight impairment. For you, how was it, particularly in the IT field? Did you find many challenges in picking up
Yeah,
roles?
I was in a university that prided itself on doing an industrial basement year, which I never got to do.
Yeah.
But I certainly argued for uh, people after me. Chris Bailey, who was also went to Swinburne University after I did, certainly
Hmm.
was able to do his IBL, which is fantastic because I think that industry based learning year would have been a really vital part to my progress, which never
Yeah.
happened. And when Chris got to do his, I was ecstatic. Well, happy for him because
Mm.
that's what we fought for. Um,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, um, and basically, yeah, it was really hard because I was the only blind student pretty much at every school that I went to,
Oh,
um,
okay.
primary, secondary, and at uni, until probably second or third year, because I was doing a 4 year degree
Hmm.
because it was a double major. So yeah, probably was the second or third year where I was joined by other blind students, and we formed amongst other people in wheelchairs and other disabilities, we formed a student union group called Equal Access Network,
Yeah.
um, at Swinburne, and we basically were able to pretty much rattle the cages and drum the drums and pretty much got things moving. But by that time, I was well and truly finished. So yeah, I mean, I remember they offered me to do honours, and my marks weren't great, but they
Yeah.
weren't exactly my fault that they weren't great. The
Yeah.
university was quite happy to say that I, quote unquote, had the potential to be, a high mark student, which I did prove later on in my postgrad. Um, so um, it's funny how that works out because when I did my postgrad a few years later, um, everything was online. And it was amazing in the late 90s and early 2000s how, so we had some very um, forward mind thinking people actually running those courses who were quite happy to put things online.
Hmm.
My marks dramatically were different to my undergrad. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so and now it's funny how you and I are now doing a TAFE course, and we've not only gone back 20 odd years, but we've even gone back further than that, where things are online, but they're not exactly accessible. So
Yeah.
um,
It,
it's yeah, it's
so
frustrating.
with employers, do employers see your vision or your lack of vision as a, well, how can he do the job? You've got to prove to me. And like anyone going into an interview has to prove that, yeah, they can do the job. But you would have had that extra challenge where you had to be able to say,
Yeah, I think
regardless.
yeah, I think I mean I think with employers it's an interesting one because you've got to not only prove yourself to be able to do the job
Mm,
based on their selection criteria, but you've also got to be able to prove that you can overcome the barriers that your blindness brings with that
yeah,
to actually achieve that um, or achieve those tasks that are actually out that are part of that position description. So it's a really hard um, um, uh, thing to actually balance when you're actually in a job interview because you're not only trying to convey the information that you can do the job based on what your experience and your skills, but you also got to be mindful that you need to explain to them how you're actually able to do that
yeah,
position as a blind person. Um, yeah, where I think when I was working at Coles Mine, we weren't very sure how I was going to do the stuff because they were still using the old IBM 3270s.
oh gosh, okay, yep,
And they'll go back to your day, Narelle, I'm sure.
yeah, well, thank you, yes.
Um, and so yeah, we were we were interested to see whether back then what terminal programs would work with the screen reader, which was JAWS 4, I think 4.51 or something like
Yeah,
that. So yeah, we had to do a little bit of um, experimenting, playing around. There was a bit of JAWS scripting there for a little while. So there was a whole lot of factors that actually were you know achieve to actually allow me to do that job.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
and then basically, obviously, when I was doing the web development side of things, well, that again had a whole range of um, uh, yeah, barriers and issues that came up. Um, in particular, development environments using shell terminal shells and all that sort of stuff. So, but most of that time when I was doing web development work, I was using Linux. So I didn't really use a lot of Windows for that. But yeah, when I was at Vision Australia, it sort of brought me back to the reality of things because that's what people were using Windows.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so that's where sort of had to come back to the reality of, well, this is what everyone's using day to day. So it's a case of trying to fit in and making sure that everyone can use the stuff that they need to use, so they can complete their jobs. And that's what my role was as a job access panel assessor.
Yeah.
Um,
But what are the challenges that you're finding today, just in your everyday life, like to do your shopping, to pay your bills? Are things over that period since, you've been at school and you've been in the IT industry, have you seen things improve with accessibility or have
I
they
think
worsened?
I've I think we're at I think we're at a very interesting crossroads where um, we have artificial intelligence now interpreting graphics, etc. Um, and there's what I'm noticing since Apple um, have put in their screen recognition mode in their voiceover screen reader is that a lot of companies are not really looking at accessibility on their apps because everyone seems to be using that, which is fine.
Mm,
But the problem is that yeah, that can be a resource that like, can drain the battery on the phone. There's a number of factors, such as
yeah.
networking, if it needs to use the network to actually recognize the images. That sort of, yeah, they're factors. I'm also seeing a lot of um, I still see a lot more accessibility issues in travel. Um,
Oh, okay.
Mainly accommodation bookings and all that sort of
Mhm.
stuff. Yeah, it's
What about to get around? So if I know you travel a lot in your work, how do you manage getting around, finding where you've got to go? People I don't think realize just how much you do travel in your work. How do you do that, Mark?
well, I mean, they're they use GPS. That's the global positioning service, and they're basically satellites that are up in space that allow us to orientate from
Mm.
point A to point B, or be able to navigate through a map.
Yep.
There are standalone devices. Some assistive technology companies have made standalone devices. There's probably only really one on the market at the moment in Australia. There's a couple,
Mhm.
but I mainly use the second category of GPS apps, and that's based on the phone um, using apps.
Yep.
And I use a number of GPS-based apps to assist with not only getting directions but also finding um, locations, doing some wayfinding at times.
Okay. So what about paying bills, things like that? I know for myself, I often get frustrated because I can ask companies to send them to me via email. And I know I got another one again the other day and it's on paper. And for me, that's no good. I can't do it. What strategies do you use to
Uh,
handle that type of issue?
well, wherever it's possible, I'll get my bills electronically,
Yeah.
email, online. that's pretty much the case for me now most of the time. I can't think of any one bill that I do get now that's print. Most of them are definitely electronic.
Yeah.
So that's what I work on. But some of those, which is an interesting point, because some of those are not accessible. You basically need to interpret the data when you read it.
Yes.
I think the worst one for me is the electricity bill that I get. It's very difficult to really work out how much I actually have used, which is not terribly great because I can actually tell what the amount of the bill is. But if I wanted to break it down, I really have some issues with that,
Oh,
where
interesting.
um, visually it may look um, appropriate for a person to actually determine how much they've used, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are things like that that do still happen where bills are not um, laid out properly and don't have the appropriate text that make it easy to understand.
Yeah. One of
Um,
the interesting things that I've really cottoned onto recently is I use the wallet feature on my iPhone a lot now because I then know exactly how, you get told how much the bill is going to be like at the checkout, but if you need to go back and look at it later, you can't because it's on a paper and I can't read it.
yeah,
The wallet has given me the ability to quickly go in, see how much I've spent, say, okay, yep, I know how much I've spent for the day. And when you're budgeting, all of those things that everyone does in their daily life, that's a nice little technology feature that works well.
yes, yeah.
Mark, I always ask everyone for a tip at the end. You being you, I want two tips.
Two tips.
Two tips. I want a tip. What tip could you give for people with challenges such as vision impairment, any type of disability, where they're out there looking for work? What tip could you give them? What's the one thing that you could give them that may help them find work?
Give it a go. If it's something that you are interested in, definitely go for it because if you don't, then you won't know. And you know, sitting around doing nothing is not the way to actually achieve anything.
That's really good words, wise words. Now, what about for that same person? I mean, there's a lot of kids, and we know of children coming through school that have got blindness, vision impairment, severe vision impairment. What tip would you give them about managing life with a vision impairment so that they become a functioning, or their parents, so that they become a functioning, happy part of our society?
Um, Probably just to accept your vision impairment, and
Mm.
that can be hard for some people, but to accept it by actually doing things with it and
Mm.
actually being involved maybe with some of the vision impaired community, such as sports. I've always been a sporting person ever since I was a young child. So I played
Mm.
cricket and um, athletics, goalball, swish.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of recreational things, but also bear in mind that you also need to have a life outside vision impairment, um, where because you will be talking to a lot of your friends who are not vision impaired. You're going to have more friends that aren't, and that you could use those skills that you um, get from being around um, vision impaired, sports and communities to actually fit in, um, and just by accepting your vision impairment, by actually making it fit into what you want to do rather than you fit into it,
Mm.
um, is the way. that you're actually going to find benefits in your life. So yeah, and I know, and that could take any number of things, but basically, if there's a barrier or an issue, talk to other visually impaired people. How did you get over that, or what's the best way to actually achieve this?
Mm.
You'll be surprised. I'm
And
not saying,
actually,
not going to say you're going to be able to fly planes or you know, yeah, or basically, um, um, you be captain of ships, but there are people who have sailed as visually impaired people. So, being a part of a crew on a sailing yacht is very, very possible. In fact, it can be quite beneficial in situations. So yeah, things like that. It's just working around. If you have an interest, certainly don't drop it because of your vision impairment. Just find out where you can fit in with that and how you can actually be involved. And there will be people who say, "Oh no, you can't do it." No, that's fine. That's just their opinion. But talk to other visually impaired people and say, "Oh, okay, that's what this person does. I'm going to go back to that club or wherever and just say, yep, this is how I'm going to be able to do it. This is what
yeah.
I need to do it." Um, yeah,
And I think that's the one thing meeting you really struck home with me in everything that I was dealing with at the time, that anything's possible. It's just the way you do it, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. Look, I mean, this is visual impairments, which brings up challenges, but it certainly, um, it certainly doesn't preclude you from actual, doing things. I mean, there are certain things you can't do, but we all have to accept that. We can't drive. We can't. Yeah.
But there's a lot of things people that drive can't do as well. Like
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
have the opportunity to take a dog with us everywhere.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
a lot of people that drive just don't get that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's six of one,
Um,
half dozen of the other, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it's that acceptance thing too. Sometimes it's very hard for people to do that. And they spend the rest of their lives not accepting. I
Mm.
think once you get over that acceptance, it puts a whole perspective to it.
Mark, look, thanks for your time today. It's been really valuable. And even though we've been friends for a long time, I've learned a bit more about you and how you manage things. And thanks.
Thanks, Noel.
Hey, that's another episode of the Digital Access Show. Find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple. Subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. And if you know of someone that you think may be really good to come on the show, we'd love to hear from you. So I'm Narelle, and we'll see you next time.